Good evening to everyone. I know, as Mitch said, we've got a very big audience tonight, which is terrific. And we've got some sailing royalty on the panel, all from North Sails, that great organisation that supplies yachts all around the world. First of all, Mark Bradford, who's the Managing Director of North Sails Australia. Mark sails in everything from Etchells up to skippering the 100-foot maxi blackjack. So a big welcome to him. Paul Westlake, Vice President of North Sails International, responsible for the Grand Prix market. Now, the man we know as Flipper has done a lot of miles as well, anything from maxis, the Wild Oats 11 and 10, to the J-class boats, to the TP52s. He's been around a while, our friend Flipper. Rob Greenhalgh, a Volvo ocean race and veteran, 5 times around the planet. So probably need to say no more, but currently he's working on moth sail development for North Sails, which is very different to racing around the world, but we'll get some views on that a bit later. And currently involved with Dave Griffith on Whisper. And finally, but not least, Alby Pratt, Sales Manager for North Sails Australia. Has been with North for a long while. I think he started there as a young apprentice, and he's done Volvo race and racing also around the world, Admirals Cups and Hobart races. So a massive interest here in these boys, and a massive experience, no doubt. But what we're going to do to set the scene tonight is we're going to do a practice race. We're going to race we've acquired a Beneteau 40.7, and we're going to race from Sydney, starting in the harbour. We're going to race to Lade Mark off Lion Island and then return. And we're going to appoint Mark appropriately as the boss. He's the skipper. Rob is going to be the tactician. Paul Flipper is going to be in charge of the mainsail trim, and Alby is on the jib and spinnaker trim. The breeze is going to be a classic building sea breeze, a northeasterly summer sea breeze. We're going to start at about 8 to 10 knots with an ebb tide. The start's going to be off Shark Island, go through the heads and then head north to the Lade Mark off Pittwater. The forecast is for a building sea breeze. It's just a classical Sydney summer's day. We've got a lovely Beneteau 40.7. The bottom's been finished and polished, so we've got no excuses. So we're on our way to the start. So I'll hand over to our skipper and helmsman, Mark Bradford. All yours, Mark. Take it away.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, well, like to start with, and firstly, welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for giving us your time and joining in tonight. To start with, I just probably reel it back a little bit. The forecast that Peter just put out, we'd probably look to that from our navigator Silvio, probably in the time leading up to the race, and get a bit of information. Because, you know, at North Sails, we love to sell sails, but when we go racing, we don't necessarily like to take them all. One of the big keys in sailing a sailing boat or doing anything you're trying to race is minimising the weight that you take on board. So while you should have plenty of sails in your quiver, you wouldn't necessarily take everything for this Lion Island race. So we would have a pretty robust discussion about what we'd take with us on our Beneteau before the race, you know, and that'd probably be Rob, myself, and the trimmers, the guys in the speed loop, and ultimately you'd have someone in charge of that, so you do end up with sails on board and not all on the dock, as we've seen many times. So, so then, you know, we'd get through that part and we'd be heading out to the start, and a standard operating procedure is the pre-race briefing. It's generally just to go over what the plan's going to be, whether your goal is to win on IRC, whether it's to look at some new sails, try out some new crew, maybe a new bowman, or, you know, maybe try out your new watch system or something like that. There's always a goal that you'd sort of roll through. So we'd have the briefing, we'd have a weather briefing, which is a bit more finite about what to expect when we leave the harbour, what we're going to start with, and then, you know, just depending on the race, generally safety in those parts of our briefing, we would have in a Dropbox, a shared file that everyone's got access to the protocol for the boat. And these days that includes your COVID protocol, just to keep the topic hot. So then, you know, we'd sort of go around the group and I'd, you know, get the navigator to talk about the weather, and then I'd ask Rob to address the group with what his views are for the race. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Quark. And again, hello everyone, or good evening. So I think, my view is just purely from a sail point of view and essentially boat speed. We won't get into the tactics of it because every race will be different, and this is, just make believe. But I would break that race down into getting out the harbour as a separate thing, and sails for that versus sails for what you may need round the corner when you're going from North Head up to Lion Island in this building breeze. And I think it would be a bit different. I guess the tactician's got to weigh up the risk and when you want to make your move in the race or not. It's a short race in my mind to Lion Island and back. And generally what you see is once you get out the heads, the rich get richer, it strings out, the lanes get harder to find. So I'd be probably thinking, I want to get out the heads in as good a shape as possible. The trimmers are probably thinking, we don't want to change jibs, but I'll be looking for, I'll be wanting to have on board whatever's the right jib for getting out the heads in good shape. And then we have to either go up range with a jib later in the race or do a headsail change at some stage. So that will be a discussion going on. Classically pre-start, there's only 6 knots of wind and a few gusts coming down. You've got 2 jibs on the foredeck. And then it's probably about getting both in the air, making sure that the trimmers are happy with being under range on the medium or slightly over range on the light. And then, and then I'll be trying to do as much upwind as I can, just getting everyone a feel for it, trying to really get the sails dialed in so that when we make that final decision of what headsail we're going to take, which is kind of got to be between everyone. And then ultimately there's, if it is a building breeze and you got to, then you are staring down the barrel of the headsail change. It might be 2 if you're going all the way up to 20 knots of wind, depending on what boat you are and what, how many jibs you've got. It's about weighing up the penalty of the headsail change versus the penalty you might take at in the beat out of the harbour being under range on a jib. And obviously it's also about knowing your boat a bit and what your sails can and can't do. So I'll be talking to Flipper and Alby, seeing how comfortable they feel about whether they can be, up range or down range on the sails, depending on what we've got in inventory and, and how best they're gonna, sort it all out so we can get out the harbour in good shape. And then we're obviously into this, long beat north. And I guess the final decision there is, hopefully everyone has the same opinion and everyone buys into the fact that you're either going to go under range on a jib and maybe suffer a bit in the harbour, but then avoid a headsail change once you're out, or you're going to be into that peel once you're out the harbour. Final decision probably lands on the tactician, but it would vary a bit on the boat and how easy they are to peel.
So can I just put a bit of context around what Rob's talking about with range? So when we design the sails, we have a range that we try and hit for each sail, and there's a couple of factors in what we're trying to do. For a light jib, we're trying to obviously make the fabric as light as possible, and we're trying to make the shape as full as we can make it. And then as you step up the range, so the light jib might come off at 10 knots, you get into your medium jib, a bit more structure in the sail and a more robust sail, and a bit flatter in the flying shape, and so on. So what Rob's talking about with range is whether you start with a light jib and whether you're going to be able to handle it at the top of its range, which will be 10 or 11 knots, or whether you've got a sail with the medium jib at the bottom of its range to get out of the harbour, and then it'll come into range later in the race when the breeze gets up into the high teens.
So, Mark, at what stage prior to the start, you'd put your sails up, obviously the mainsail, the headsail you think you're going to use. At what stage you'd go up the harbour and have a little bit of a test, a few tacks just to settle everything down?
Yeah,
what's your timing there?
Look, we try and always get to the start line now before the race. That's always a pretty good rule of thumb. Then there's plenty of time to roll through if there's an issue with getting sails on locks or whatever. You've got a bit of time up your sleeve. But I think to talk about what we're talking about here, so you sail up the harbour, and what you're looking for is cues. So you've got to decide whether the sails set that you've got on is in range. And as a helmsman, the big cue for me, which is probably the same cue for most people, is I've got the feel of the boat, so I've got the rudder angle. So if you're overpowered, you've got a lot of, you're physically got to drive the boat pretty hard to keep it going straight. And if you're underpowered, the boat will be upright and you won't have a lot of, load on the steering wheel, on the helm, or less rudder angle. So that's one cue. But the main cue to use is just angle of heel. Would that be right? Flipper, Alby, what cues would you look for?
I'd say, for sure, angle of heel is king. Just going back to what Rob was talking about with the forecast and the jib selection and range, we know it's an ebb tide. We know it's a building nor'easter. We know it's going to be choppy as we get out. We have to get around North Head. There's going to be a little bit of a lee, but it's going to get really bouncy. And I think the key, especially a boat like the Beneteau, we're going to need a lot of power to get through that transition period. And as Rob says, really be first on the starboard, because the beat up to Lion Island should be long starboard, short port, especially with southerly flow if the currents the set's heading south. So I'd be pushing pretty hard, talking with Alby, and I think we'd be actually hedging pretty hard to keep the light jib on, to make sure that we get out of the heads, off the start line, down the harbour, and especially around that transition, because huge amount of boat lengths is going to be lost in those big waves, and especially if you've got a tack around North Head. And so anything we can do to keep horsepower on the boat, power in the boat. And then I'd feel confident that once we get onto the long starboard, even if the sea breeze is building, we'll get to the point where I think we'll be able to, flatten the mainsail. We'll get everybody hiking, shippers and Rob will be hiking hard, and we'll do everything we can to try and keep the boat in balance the whole way up. If we have to do a jib change, Alby, it'll be setting it up, we'll be in the port groove, right? We'll do a quick hoist, flop over onto port, drop, and then get back to starboard as fast as we can. What do you think, Al?
Yeah, for me, what I'd be looking at is making sure we've got enough entry in the sail, especially for the bit around out through North Head when it's going to get really sloppy, as you say. You're looking at power with Traveller and all that sort of thing. And I'd be concentrating on a jib which has got a nice full entry, so it's easy to steer a big heavy boat like a Beneteau in that slot. Last thing you want is too flat, too fine a jib that'd be hard to steer to in the chop. And definitely something which you can really whale on the backstay on when we get that bit around North Head. So we might have to lug it for half an hour before we're ready to change. But yeah, erring on the power to make sure we're in good shape as we get around North Head in the front pack.
So Mark, we've started and we're underway. What's the communication now between Rob and the trimmers? Just talk us through how you'd be setting all that up.
Yeah, that's a good point. So a good question. So what happens is, you start the boat and you get off the line, and if you've got the sort of skills that I've got, you're normally in the second row or in a pretty tough spot that you've got to try and survive. And then so the helmsman is really in the speed loop with the trimmers. So the three of us, all we're concentrating on is boat speed and trying to sail the boat as close to the design targets that come with the boat. I think with a Beneteau 40.7 is probably 7.1 knots would be your upwind target from memory. And then Rob, as the tactician, he tries to pick the mode. And by mode, we mean there's a couple of different ways to skin the cat. There's the target speed, there's a high slow mode, and then there's a low fast mode. So depending on where you line up in the line, Rob will be trying to keep you in the open air or the free air for as long as possible by picking the mode. So if there's someone tight under your lee bow, he'll say sail 2/10 under targets, and then us, the speed loop, switch to trying to sail the boat at 6.9 knots instead of 7.1. And Rob's asked us to do that just because he wants to live in a thin lane or live high off the guy that's under our bow. So once he gives us that information, there's no good as the helmsman just turning the boat up and sailing at 6.9 because you'll just stop. So then this is a bit of the art of it. And similarly, just to close the loop on that part of the conversation before we move on, you might want to sail a fast mode because the guy above you might be rolling or trying to roll over you. And so Rob will say, we need a fast mode here, guys. I want 7-3, 7-4. So we're trying to sail a high mode. So I'm doing my best to sail the boat at 6-9, but then Rob, is there anything you want to add to that as the tactician?
Let me jump in. Let's presume we've had a good start. Squawk's had a blinder and got us off the line in good shape. One thing I will just going back a few minutes before the start, let's just make sure we have put up our change jib before the start. Check that the trimmers have managed to get the battens into that jib, so when you do come to maybe peel halfway to Line Island, you don't get the jib on the foredeck and realise the battens aren't in or something like that. And that's happened to all of us in the past. And so it's always any jibs that you might use for that day, make sure they've gone up before the start. And that's why you need that half an hour or 45 minutes beforehand. You might need to put 3 jibs in the air and just check they're all ready to go. They're luff flaked and they're ready to go straight up the head for when you need them. You know, you might put one up just a few miles away from Line Island because it's suddenly blowing the 20 knots. So it's always make sure they go up. And also, I think it's easy to kid yourself and you put a medium up in the pre-start and think, oh no, we'll live on this. We'll be all right. But you're not. And, you know, and as Philippa's saying, you suddenly get under North Head, it's choppy and you're on a medium, world of pain. So just, you know, don't kid yourselves and make sure everything's ready to go. Anyway, we're off the start line. And what mode are we going to sail? We've had a great start and it's a run out tide. So we probably want to get across to the, you know, across towards Bradley's. So I'd probably ask for a slightly quicker mode, just to shoot over there a bit quicker. And maybe when I'm halfway to Bradley's, I'll probably put it back into VMG and then, you know, sit in the maximum current. And then obviously it's just going to be looking for wind shifts. And in general, you know, when you're lifted in the harbour, just put the hammer down a bit and just sail a click quicker just so you can shoot across to that next shift. But, you know, you could have traffic to manage and all sorts. So you just got to, you know, manage your modes. Sort of more advanced move is if there's a boat coming along that you may have to dip, rather than dipping, you know, put the boat into a higher, slower mode to cross at a slightly further point to windward so that you keep more options open to you. But, you know, Alby, you know, mode-wise, tactician has to communicate that to the trimmers and in advance as well, because you can't make instant changes to the boat, you know, whether it's backstay, trim, traveller, it will take a bit of time. So it's all got to be, you know, give them at least a minute or so of warning. And, you know, why don't we go, we'll put the boat into fast mode. I've told that to Flipper, I want to be a 10th quicker. He's then working with, you know, Alby and Squawk to get Squawk over the hump.
So what are they, let's talk now to the specific trimmers. Okay, Flipper, you want speed. You know, what do you do to the mainsail trim to generate a little bit more speed?
So the first thing I do, if the normal target was say 7-1 and we wanted to go 2/10 faster, the first thing I do would be pull the backstay on and let the traveller down. So they're 2 keys, because pulling the backstay on is going to flatten the mainsail and it's also going to twist. It's going to open the top of the mainsail. So there's going to be less aerodynamic drag. So, you know, that's an instantaneous speed gain. But as I let the traveller down, I've got to be working with Alby because he's got to ease the barber hauler at the same time. If he's barber hauling, if he's tweaking the jib in, and I let the boom, the traveller, the main boom down into the slot with the jib, we're not going to go any faster. We're just going to tip over. So I'll be saying to Alby, we'll know where he's set up relative to the mainsail setup. So if we're pure, what I'd call pure VMG, which is sailing the boat's targets, need to go 2/10 fast, backstay on to flatten and open the mainsail a little bit, traveller down a bit. And then if Alby's got some barber hauler in, we need to let the clue of the jib out a little bit as well. And that'll be instantaneous speed. No, Mark won't have to do anything for that. That's just changing the aerodynamic forces on the boat. He'll keep steering the same course.
Okay, now you want to squeeze. You're in a position you want to do 6/9s. What are your trimmers doing now?
It's pretty well the reverse, shippers. It's going from target to a high mode, traveller up, because traveller will pull more rudder load onto the boat. To be able to go high, you want a little bit more side force onto the foils of the boat, onto the rudder and onto the keel. So you want to force the boat to turn up a little bit into the wind. So Mark's got to pull more rudder to resist that. So it's traveller up, it's letting some backstay off, but be very careful. If you ever let the backstay off, the mainsail trimmer should always be easing the sheet at the same time. I see too many times sailing around the harbour where you see someone ease the backstay to get more power into the boat, but they don't ease the main sheet as well. And the mainsail completely close, the top telltale stall, and then that becomes very, very draggy.
And Alby, when you want to squeeze mode, talk us through headsail.
Yeah, well, there's two different scenarios, and I think a lot of people on this call are going to have either option. One, we're on a typical IRC boat, which has non-overlapping jibs, and then you have the option of the barber hauler, which you can move the lead in and out, which is, fantastic for ability. But a lot of the older style boats are still running overlapping genoas. So if we want to go fast mode on the non-overlapping genoa, we're just cracking a bit of barber hauler alongside the traveller. If we want to go fast mode on a boat with overlapping genoas, then you may have to ease the car back a little bit just to open the jib a bit. Or if you don't have the option of that, you may just have pin stops. Well, then you actually got to physically just crack an inch or two of sheet to go the fast mode. And vice versa, if we're going high mode, there's only so much we can do on a boat with genoas. You just bring it in till it's max trim, basically. But if you've got barber haulers, then you have the option of really being able to get aggressive with the barber hauler. And especially if you've got a boat underneath you, don't hesitate to bring the barber hauler in just to maintain that lane and keep clear of the boat to leeward.
Okay, we're getting through the heads, and Mark and Rob, what's the dialogue here? You feel okay, you're slow, you're fast. What dialogue, Rob, are you giving back to Mark as the helmsman?
If we're approaching the heads, it's the trickiest time of this. With obviously starts tricky and stressful, but then under the heads there, although it's rare that people pass each other coming in there, but we've got to concentrate. It's full concentration until we're out and probably on our long starboard lane. And I'll be obviously talking to helms about how the boat feels and what's coming next, trying to pick our line through under the north head there. But really, I guess from a tactician's point of view, it's finding that long starboard lane, which is going to take us probably all the way up to Longreef, depending on the exact direction of the wind. I think the trimmers and the helmsmen are working very, very hard all under north head there. And to be honest, you sort of pick your point, how far off you're going to be, whether it's 50 meters or 100 meters, and then it's just up to the trimmers and the driver just to make sure the boat gets through there as good as we can. And obviously coming out of there, you got to have your lane, which is high, so everyone gets as close as they dare, and you just got to get out of there in good shape.
And Mark, what sort of input are you looking back from Rob from, against the opposition, I guess, whether you're high, you're low, you're fast, you're slow? How much feedback are you expecting from Rob as the tactician? And conversely, how much then are you giving through the boat to the trimmers to, you want to be faster or slower, etc.? How often do you hoping to get that information?
It's a pretty different scenario to the start. We're talking about fine changes there. When you get up under the heads, it's about, what we like to say, keeping the boat on its feet. And Rob was talking about, the really key part here is the speed loop have to be just tuned in with each other, because the changes are bigger changes. They're bigger sheet movements, and they're more aggressive changes with the backstay on and off, just to keep the boat, the angle of heel constant, and keep the boat, rolling through the water accurately. So at that point, Rob's trying to position the boat tactically. So he's kind of got control of that. And I'll just be working with Flipper and Alby on just sailing the boat as accurately as we can through very sort of puffy, up-down pressure, shifty conditions.
So it's a real coordination. I mean, Rob may be calling the puffs, and Alby and Flipper are reacting to where you want to steer, whether you want to go high or slow or bad wave coming. It's a real team effort, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, in
absolutely.
what you touched on there, Shippo, was I think that's another key person in the speed loop is the person who's calling the breeze, and depending on the boat, you quickly, it's not the tactician doing that job. Tactician's got plenty to do rather than trying to communicate what wind may or may not be coming to the trimmers. And I think that offside trimmer, who's probably legs over the side somewhere up in the middle of the boat, is calling the breeze down to main sheephurst, to flipper, and to Alby, so that they know what they're setting up for short term. And I think what is important, there's two wind calls there. It's the short term instant bullets they're going to hit you, and where the helmsman and the main sheet guy have got to react quickly to keep the boat on its feet. But then there's also the what's coming in the next 2 minutes, which require a bigger gear change, whether it's a big backstay change or a big traveller movement, things that can't happen instantly, like an easing of a main sheet or feathering the boat. That the tactician, I think, could be a bit more involved in that. Like, right, I'm expecting a downtrend over the next 2 minutes, but they shouldn't really be involved too much in the gusts coming now or not. Hopefully we can find somebody else on the rail who's doing that sort of side of things.
And Rob, what's a good way to call? What's the call that you like, in time or boat lengths, or how's the feedback there? What's the best feedback, do you believe?
I think time's good, but and I think ideally when you get experience, you can tell whether it's heading or lifting the pressure, and and how big the differential is. We've all been on the harbour where and it's tricky. You get gusts which are only got another half knot in. You get gusts which have got 3 knots of wind in, and
yeah.
I think it's each boat gets used to it. I mean, how they do it, you've got to get the right person doing it, and ideally keep that consistent and not have lots of people piping in. So I think it's a bit of personal preference for helmsmen and trimmers, what they like, and then it's just getting a guy to do it, or a person, a guy or a girl to do it, who then gets a feel for it, and you get a rapport with that person, what to expect with what they call. I think it's important you don't have a different person calling it every day. If you've got the same person there, get them to do it, because you quickly get a feel. I like timing, gusts in 3, 2, 1. And likewise, what I, classically on the harbour is very good. Pressure sometimes doesn't move that much. And, you can see one sitting up there, and you can just classically is changing your mode upwind just to squeeze another half boat length of height out of a boat, just to come up and kiss on the side of a gust. Gives you another couple of degrees of lift and a little bit more wind, and I think that's the key to it all.
So the wind caller is very important for the trimmers. They know if a gust's coming, and also for the helmsman. It's peripheral information, but it all goes into the whole package of how you react to it, I guess.
I mean, I think in the harbour you're joining the dots.
Yeah.
There's these little puffs, little cat's paws of wind, and in your J70 or your Exshore, you're literally trying to link them all together. And in your bigger boat, you're doing the same, but the dots are a bit further apart because the boat's a bit bigger, going a bit faster. So you're always just trying to join the dots. And once you get outside, it's a slightly different way of calling the breeze, because things are a bit more stable. It's the gusts aren't as obvious; they're more often veins of wind.
Yeah.
And the mode changing is a bit different.
Okay.
I think, sorry, Shippers.
I'll just say we're outside the heads. We've tacked onto starboard. We've got a long lay through up to Long Reef, and the breeze is starting to build. And our sister ship alongside us is just going a tad quicker. Well, what do we do?
Yeah.
So we've got a light genoa on. We've got a light, started with a light jib, but the breeze is now going to steady 11, 12, 13 knots.
Well, the first thing I'd be looking at is the overall depth of the mainsail. So the controls there are obviously the backstay. Bending the mast is going to flatten the mainsail, and it's also going to tighten the forestay. So it's effectively going to flatten the jib as well. So backstay is a key control. Outhaul on the mainsail, breeze is building. There's no point having any bag at all in the foot of the mainsail anymore. So you've got to take the time to be able to pull them, make sure that the outhaul's out tight, cunniam snug down. And if you've got a boat that's set up for vang sheeting to be able to use the boom vang, you should be for sure at about 14 knots starting to use the boom vang to also further bend the mast and further flatten the mainsail. little bit of traveller down, a little bit of twist, as I said, to balance the boat. But be careful, because you're getting to the point where the jib, and the jib trimmers always wind the jib on too hard, shippers. It's been a problem since Captain Cook sailed around. So any mainsail trimmer worth his salt knows that the jib trimmer is the one who can make him look good or bad. So as soon as you start easing the traveller down, you'll see the backwind, the bubble coming into the front of the mainsail. As soon as you're starting to see that bubble, that's got to be the telltale for saying to Alby, saying to the jib trimmer, we need to flatten out. We maybe need a little bit of ease. If he can ease the car back, what can he do to open that slot up? Because we've got this deeper jib that's returning back into the mainsail. So, but the key, once again, is that backstay, because the backstay flattens the mainsail, takes the load off, and tightens the forestay. So they're your triggers for going fast, but be very careful not to just ease the traveller down and then just put the mainsail in the way of the leach of the jib. And then the mainsail just flaps, and that doesn't look good on TV, and it doesn't look good for the boat speed.
Okay, Alby, we're in that scenario. The breeze is up. You're the jib trimmer. What do we do?
Yep. First of all, we're stuck on the light jib, so we're really overpowered on that. First thing you've got to make sure is you've got enough halyard on the sail. And we see this a lot, people sailing around with their halyard way too soft, especially on the more modern IRC boats with non-overlapping genoas. If you're down a little bit on halyard, because the sail is so high aspect, it has a really big effect on the jib. So make sure you've got your halyard on a winch all the time. Don't leave it on the jammer. Assuming you've got a winch, you can put it on. So you can easily adjust it, and it's also not slipping. So first thing is get plenty of halyard into it. And you may need to ease a bit of sheet and get the helmsman to give you a little bit of a luff to get that halyard. And then probably taking the in-haul out. If you've got in-haul, you're going in-haul out, maybe not all the way out, but probably sort of halfway or sort of 2/3 out. And then if flipper's still griping and still barking at you, you're thinking a bit of car aft, just to twist open the top of the sail and depower. And then as the out-haul in-haul goes out and the car comes aft, you may need just to trim on a little bit as well.
Right. Okay, Mark, we're approaching Long Reef, and was really overpowered. It's 15 knots, and you and Rob have got to discuss the tactics. We've got to tack onto port, a short one to get round Long Reef. Got the wrong jib on. What do we do? What's your discussion there between everyone?
Yeah, well, look, there is a pretty quick way to depower a sailing boat if you're organised, and especially when you're trying to lump a jib and get around a reef, and you've got the breeze is building, but the race is not long enough to justify a full change. And as you can reef the mainsail, the first reef in the mainsail is normally shallow enough. It reduces the luff length by something like 12%, and you can lose a little bit of sail area. The boat may get a little bit out of balance, but that's a quick fix to getting overpowered. So I suggest that everyone goes and practices reefing, because once you get the reefing down pat, then the jib change is not as important in this sort of a race.
But we've still got 8 miles to go, 10 miles to go to the weather mark. You're going to lug the light jib with a reef, or would you contemplate a change?
Oh, look, ideally not. So, so bringing it back, we're a fair way back up the track at Long Reef there. So, Alby's done a good job of putting the jib in the port groove. So as we learned earlier, so we can, we can get set up for a tack change. I guess it's all on Rob here, because he's the one that's got to make a decision about how much loss he's prepared to take and where he wants to take that loss. There might be some flatter water inshore. He might want to take it in behind the reef, and so you might do it at this point, or he might want to save his change up for later on, because he's the one that's got a really good read on your competition that's right near you, that you're having a battle for a bottle of rum with.
Yeah, I mean, this is the classic. Knowing your weather, making confident that the build's in, it's coming, and then I think you've just got to get on with it. I mean, every 20 minutes you delay it, you're making it worse. And I think people, it could a tack change really doesn't cost you very much. Even a bare-headed change doesn't cost you very much. It's not like the boat stops. You're still plodding along at 5 knots, just a bit wider. So yeah, you've got to lose in a tack change. You should only lose 5 or 6 boat lengths, and a bare-headed, a bare-headed change, maybe 10 boat lengths. But you'll get that back quickly with the right jib on. You suddenly change off your light jib, you'll be half a knot quicker. So for me, I would be talking to the trimmers and sort of saying, right, we've still got a long way to go. We've still got an hour and a half of upwind to go. If there was 20 minutes of upwind to go, or half an hour of upwind to go, we'd be wringing it out and maybe putting the reef in for 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But with over an hour of upwind to go, I'd be getting into that change as soon as I could.
Now, Alby, we talk about a tack change. Just explain exactly what a tack change means.
So tack change, it's a great way to do it, because the hardest part of the jib change, or an inline jib change, is either hoisting the old sail up outside the new sail or getting the old sail down outside the new sail. So ideally, if you set up correctly and you've sort of planned it all out beforehand, in this instance, we're set up in port groove. So we're doing our long starboard tack, and maybe we're coming into long reef. So we've got our starboard groove open, so we can get our new jib on deck, and we get we take the weather sheet off the current jib, put it on the new jib, take the new jib forward, and just straight up hoist it up to weather. And then as soon as it's up and we've got halyard on it, make sure you get the halyard on first. We tack over onto port, and then we can bring our old jib down on the weather side, just drop it on the deck, run it straight aft, take the sheet off, put it on the new jib. Then we've got a bit of time, pack the old jib away, and by then hopefully we're out round long reef, and we've got the long starboard opening up again. We just tack straight back and minimum loss.
Right. Okay. All right. We'll settle down with a medium heavy on or whatever, and full main, and we're approaching the mark, and everything's pretty good. You're happy with the helm, Mark? Everything feels a lot better now?
Yeah, look, for sure the change helped, and everyone's sort of just starting to plan now and this is sort of a little bit where the navigator comes in, because they start talking about what we're heading in there to go around the mark. Is that right, Shippers?
That's right. Yeah, we're approaching the laid mark, port round.
Yeah, and so the conversation, at this point, 10 minutes out from the mark, is what sail are we going to carry back? And that's really driven a lot by the navigator in telling you, the heading and the true wind direction, and you can figure out what angle the wind's going to be on the boat and what the best sail is to carry on the way back. I think in this situation it's pretty simple, because it's a jibe set onto a port pole, and it's a northerly, right? So it's going to be just a symmetrical sail on the way back. So
what's the setup, Rob? Are you talking to the trimmers about the manoeuvre here with the jibes?
Well, as Squawk said there, I would have chatted to the navigator. We know what the true wind angle is out. Likely, tight port pole, and then squaring up as we get out round Barrenjoey a bit. It may even be a short period on the on a jib, but that's by the by. But yeah, obviously the comms loop has gone out. Everyone's got to be well aware of what the manoeuvre is. Jibe set in this case. For me at this stage, the tactician isn't explaining to people what the manoeuvre is. The crew have probably already been talking about the manoeuvre. They've had 2 hours to talk about the manoeuvre, so they'll be well rehearsed on it. And really, what I'll be feeding back is what mode I want out once the kite is set and we're going, what angle I want to sail. And to be honest, if it's around headlands at that stage, you are probably trying to get back around Barrenjoey, depending on where the mark is exactly. I'll probably, I'll be giving a heading. The navigator or myself would have, got a heading no further right than whatever number it might be, 120, 130 or something like that, to get us around that heading. And then once we get around, we'll, start turning away into the mode I want, whether it be VMG or maybe even a slightly fast mode to get us away from land a little bit.
Okay, Flipper, we're around the mark. We're on our way. What do we do with the mainsail trim?
The mainsail trim, so, you know, if we're doing the traditional Lion Island race and we're coming out and we are a little bit shy to get back around Barrenjoey there, I'd keep the mainsail still fairly flat and twisted, but using the boom vang just to be able to control the amount of rudder angle and amount of heel that Mark's got on the boat, you know. And then just trying to, once again, balance the boat as much as you can. Mainsails really shouldn't be flapping upwind and they shouldn't be flapping downwind. So it's just a matter of finding the right amount of twist, right amount of sheet ease, and the right amount of boom vang just to stop the middle of the sail flapping around too much, and just balancing the boat. And then helping Alby a bit with the crew placement. Obviously, if we're a bit shy, everyone's going to need to be hiking, because I assume it's probably 18, 20 knots by now, shippers, you know, and so we're going to be fully hiking and then bringing the weight back as the speed comes up, you know, trying to get as much weight as we can back, keeping the bow out as much as we possibly can.
Okay, we've set the spinnaker. So what difference does that make to your mainsail trim then? We've got the spinnaker up and we're pretty poles fairly well back and we're away.
Yeah, so once we're VMG running, obviously you're happy to have the mainsail as deep as you can, so easing the outhaul. Backstay should be just firm enough that the forestay's not moving around, that the mast isn't pumping, especially when you're in 20 knots. But really keeping as much power on the boat as you can. And I always kind of think on a boat like you know, a Beneteau, at the end of the day, hopefully you have a Windex up the top of the mast. I always use that Windex as a kind of a relative position to the boom, just to keep an eye that I've got the boom in the right position. If we're sailing dead downwind, you obviously want the boom at 90 degrees to the Windex, and you can basically follow that 90-degree rule for quite a long way. And then, but keeping the boom vang on stops the boat rolling too much. But I'm still looking for the telltales to be flying a little bit, the leech ribbons to be flying. So there's a bit of flow up high, but we're carrying enough power down low with the outhaul east.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Alby, we've gone round the mark. We've got to reaching for a little bit before we set the chute. What do you do with the headsail when we're reaching?
Okay, so a couple of things we would have been talking to Rob as we're coming in about what the wind angle is going to be as we're leaving the mark after we've gone around. So he said, well, we're going to be on the jib we're going to be pretty wide angle on the jib for 10 minutes. So before I get to the mark, I'd make sure we have an outboard sheet ready to go on the starboard side. So as soon as we come around, we're not mucking around trying to lead that sheet. We've already rigged it up before the mark when all the crew are on the weather side. So we come around, we go straight into the outboard sheet, and then it's going to start off tight. So it's going to be a shy shoot. If we're reaching, we know it's going to be a shy shoot first of all. So we get our spinnaker. We've probably only got, you know, 1 or 2 spinnakers on board, and it'll probably be a running spinnaker to start with. So we're going to be pretty pressed with it for like 5 or 10 minutes till it frees up a bit. So first thing I do, making sure I've got my grinder organised, and I'm going to grab the biggest guy. There's going to be a lot of trimming, so I'm going to grab the biggest guy we've got on the boat. And we've got people going down below to get their wet weather gear off or on and get their lunches. And at the moment, we're just concentrating, keeping everybody on the rail till we get the chute up, jib down, got my big guy grinding. And it's going to be hard work for the next 10 minutes till we get round Barrenjoey, Whalehead. We can start getting the pole back. So making sure tweaker fully off, and just got to work that sheet so we don't wipe out.
And the headsail, do you wait till you square the pole back to repack the headsail so they keep the weight off the foredeck? Or is that?
Yep. Get it down, put a sail tie around it on the foredeck, just get everybody back, and then we'll have time to do that in about 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay. Now, Mark, we've just got a nice VMG run to the heads, and you're in control. No dramas. What are you looking for there? Just to angles.
That's right. So you know, upwind. The things you look for upwind are the boat speed targets and the tactician telling you the mode they want to sail. The thing you're looking for downwind is the true wind direction. So there'll be a target true wind direction. So for a Beneteau, it's probably 147 or something like that. So you're trying to pick a number that you're trying to hover around on your true wind you know, up and down to keep in the noise. But really, the person that's singing the tune that you're dancing to downwind is the spinnaker trimmer. So Alby and I would just go off in our own little world, and he can feel the load on the sheet. So he's giving me a bit of up a bit, down a bit, depending on the amount of load that he's got on the sheet. So, you know, there's two very different ways of getting your targets to sail the sailing boat, upwind and downwind. And so downwind right now, it's pretty much the Alby Pratt show, and he's telling me how he wants it to play out.
So are you doing it by feel, or are you working off a true wind angle, or you just, I know you can see the course, you can see North Head, but you're just aiming for that up a bit, down a bit? Yeah,
your target is the true wind angle. So you try and stick around the true wind angle. So the up a bit, down a bit, you know, if your target's 147, you're going to come up to 145. You're not going to come up to 135 because you'll break the spinnaker pole.
Yeah.
And similarly, you know, the way down, you might get a little wave to help you get down. So generally on the downside of the scope, you might run a little deep, but you've got to watch you don't run by the lee and hook the wind on the other side of the mainsail and wipe Alby out, who's standing up there trimming the spinnaker. So, you know, the range is probably 3 degrees up and maybe 5 or 6 degrees down, but the target is the wind angle.
Right. Well, we're approaching North Head, and it's 22 knots true wind speed, Rob. We've got to get this jibe right. What are the mechanics here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously coming downwind here, you know, just backing up a bit to what those guys were saying, was the other thing that might change my moding downwind, you know, where I want the guys is, you know, what they touched on is this wave train. And as you come down the coast there, the direction of the waves do change subtly as the bays change shape. And I think you've got to, if you can see that the wave train is lower, it's worth using them. And that's your moments to get some depth, you know, compared to the boats. You know, don't be locked on one thing. If the wave train changes direction, try to make the best of it. And, you know, as Squark was saying, that's about, you know, Alby on the trim, everybody identifying that, hang on, the waves are 5 degrees different direction here. It may only be for a half-mile period. But if you can, you know, lock onto that wave train just for a short 10-minute period, and then it changes again, it's very, very valuable. And what happens is you miss it, and it's, you know, half mile down the coast, the way it's a different direction, and you've kind of missed it a bit. But anyway, yeah, coming down to North Head, it gets pretty gnarly there. Obviously, sea states everywhere. The big question round there would be, you know, for me, you might go onto a heavier shoot, a reaching sail if you've got it, because we know we're coming around North Head there, the wind is going to suddenly do the big bend as it comes out of Manly and out of the harbour. So you got to come around there. You don't want to get too close in because it goes pretty light. But then at some stage, you got to get the big header, and then you've got to get around South Head. And normally you can get there with a kite, but it can get pretty ugly. And if it's blowing 20, you probably definitely want a jib ready to go. And you know that you may be dropping your kite, jib up, kite down, but then kite straight up again as soon as you're around South Head to get down to your finish line at Watson's Bay. So I think for me, I don't think there's anything too tactically challenging there, only really if you go and get yourself stuck under North Head. But it's about looking at those big bullets coming down, you know, out of Manly, and then deciding whether you got to try to roll with the punches when they hit, or you just got to get the jib up and knock the kite off. You know, at that stage of the race, you've got to make sure everyone's had their lunch, had their break, and now everyone's full noise. We're in the last, you know, really, well, from that whole race is a sprint, but, you know, for that last period, there could be 3 sail changes in the last mile of the race there from North Head to Watson's Bay. So you could easily be, you know, you could easily break a kite in the, you know, laying on your side when you get those big bullets. Yeah. Everyone's got to be fully tuned in, and really it's just getting through it.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about wind call going upwind, wind call coming downwind. Someone standing looking aft for
absolutely the whole way down there. You've got
waves,
absolutely wind and waves. Everyone pumping the boat. You know, especially something like a Beneteau where there's big benefit to be had. Okay, it's a heavier boat, but it will get on these waves and surf, and you'll get another knot of boat speed. And you need somebody, maybe 2 people pumping the main. You know, Flipper will be there with somebody else helping him rock on that main, really trying to, you know, jerk the boat along down the waves. And, you know, as Alby said, you got guys grinding the sheet the whole way down. And as you do the big surfs, the kite will collapse, it'll be braced forward, getting it all set again, and you're off again.
Yeah.
And that's got to go all the way to North Head. And then, you know, you're into the tricky stuff under North Head, and then maybe a couple of peels, and then into the finish line.
Yeah. We'll go back a step, Alby. We're coming into the heads 5 minutes before a jibe. What are you talking the crew through to set up for the jibe?
Just making sure everybody's in their positions and everybody's all switched on again. Yeah, they may have got a bit dozy down for the last sort of half hour when it's all been pretty easy. We've just been sailing along. So getting everybody dialed in. And as Rob said, yeah, this is a really critical part of the race. And you can, if you do get it wrong, yeah, you can have a shocker and blow out a chute or something like that. So, yeah, hopefully we've pulled the jibe off. And then the next bit is the tight reaching with the chute up, which is, you know, critical. You've got to have your best grinder on. You've got to have a guy on the vang for the main sheet, and guy calling the wind.
Just getting back to the wave train, Rob, and perhaps the guy on the brace, the pole angle's changing quite rapidly too when your apparent wind's going forward or back. You're working your pole as well as your sheet, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you know, you see the guys in their 470s when they pump the brace as well. You're never going to be doing that in a Beneteau, but you will get onto the waves and you'll surf down, and on the big ones, the kite will collapse and you may need to go brace forward to help catch it. It may be all right. Yeah. But I you know, depending on how big the surf is, you know, you'll be hitting 10, 12 knots boat speed in some of those surfs compared to your regular sort of 8 knots. Yeah. So they're, you know, it's a big apparent change, and, you know, and Alby will know far better than me, you know, what's needed to be done to make the best out of those surfs. So maybe he should chime in there.
Yeah. But we'll flip up with the mainsail, with the jibe. I mean, there's a few controls you've got to have locked down, like the traveller and stuff. What do you do to prepare for a jibe in reasonably fresh wind?
Yeah. Well, I think all the time, it's a really good habit. As soon as the spinnaker's up, the first thing I do, whether I'm sailing on a J class, a TP52, Wild Oats, or a Beneteau, first thing to do is put the traveller in the middle. You want to make sure that traveller's locked, because if that traveller's free flying around the place in any maneuver, it's danger. So making sure that the traveller's locked, making sure that the backstay's got enough tension on it, just in case we do wipe out of the jibe and, you know, broach and flap a bit. You want to make sure that the backstays are on firm enough to be supporting the rig, so the rig's all safe. And at around that 20 knot time, you know, it's going to be a 2-person jibe as well on the main. Now, depending on your setup, whether it's kind of external main sheet, like what I call far 40 style, where someone can bounce the main forward at the gooseneck and help me there. Otherwise, it's going to be a 2nd person winding the main. It could even be like Rob. I would traditionally grab the tactician to help you if you thought it was too windy to be able to actually pull and free throw the mainsail over yourself. And then once you're up into around the 25 knots, you're into, you know, the safety jibe with a pole, and that's basically, you know, jibe the main before you jibe the pole, and just get the mainsail across. Because if you can get the mainsail across and Mark can steer the boat, flip the mainsail across, and then he can hold the boat downwind. And then it's just a matter of getting the pole across and out the other side and everything. At least the mast is still pointing upright. We talk a lot about when there's, once you get into 20 knots, you know, keeping the boat under the mast, you know, and that's a key for steering. And maybe Mark may want to make mention of that, because it can get pretty rolly there around North Head where you're trying to pull that jibe off.
Mark, are you ultimately calling the jibe when you feel comfortable, your boat's on the wave, you just feel it right time to jibe? I know, you know, you've got to be jibing within a minute or something. Are you getting the feel for that? When's the best time to jibe?
Yeah, so how it goes, Rob will say standby jibe, and that's everyone in position. But the jibe ultimately has to get called by the helmsman in that position, because what you're trying to do is keep the boat moving. Like if you do what we call a down speed jibe, it's going to end in tears. So you try and pick your time, you pick the wave, and you communicate jibing in 3, 2, 1. Here's our chance into the jibe. So you sort of count your way into it and you try and land it when the boat's accelerating on the way down a wave. Now, you commit to the jibe when you do the first part of it, but as soon as the boom looks like it's coming towards you or loosening up and the jibe's going to happen, you need to straighten the boat out again, because otherwise you come out of the jibe too hot on the new side and that could end in a broach because the spinnaker's not really under control. So you pick your time, you go down the wave, you turn into it, commit. Then when the boom starts coming, you just straighten out a tiny bit, and then the boom will come across, the spinnaker will set, and then you just sail the boat, as Flipper was saying, under the spinnaker or on its feet.
Okay, well, look, we're running short in time and we're nearly at the finishing line. I'll just quickly give you a scenario here. We're not in a Beneteau 40.7. We've got a asymmetric spinnaker up, the jibe. Just talk us through the different tactics for a jibing and asymmetric as opposed to the symmetric that we've had up. Mark, to you.
Oh, look, that's just way easier. So, to start with an asymmetric, you're sailing downwind at a higher wind angle, so 145 true wind angle. The boat's going quite a bit faster. And so, there's less load on everything. Same thing, same call, standby jibe. You still pick the wave, you go down the jibe. And then the art to coming out the back of a jibe with an asymmetric spinnaker is you want to let the trimmers catch up to you before you start to turn the boat up to the wind angle on the new jibe. So you turn into it, you commit, you do the wiggle down when the boom comes across so you don't crash out the other side. But then you don't turn up super fast, because if you turn up too quick, the trimmer can't catch up with you to trim the Jenica in, and so the sail will stay unset for quite some time. I mean, there's a few techniques in this that I'm sure Flipper would love to, and Alby would love to get into, late main jibes and all sorts of tricky stuff you see. But, look, to jibe and asymmetric is way easier. But the real key is to let the trimmer and the grinder catch up on the way out first before you come up. Okay, well, we've just finished in Watson's Bay, and I'll wait to get the results and let you know at the end of the session how we got on. So stay tuned. So look, that was great, fellas. I mean, it's a lot, I don't think it ever hurts to be refreshed on these things. A lot of us probably know it, but to hear it from you guys is terrific. And those that didn't know it, I'm sure they learned a lot. So Mark, I'll just come back to you now. You're the skipper of Blackjack, and hopefully the Sydney Hobart awaits if the race is on. Is that the program for the boat? Yeah. So, as we're all fans of sailing, I'm sure a few people might have heard that we dropped the rig in the boat out of the boat in the Brisbane Gladstone race this year. We were 3 hours ahead of the record and 3 hours to the finish line, so it wasn't an ideal time to do something like that. And so we have a new rig coming from Southern Spars that arrives in Brisbane in November, beginning in November. Logistically, in this current situation, there's quite a few challenges because our boat builders are all Liam Wolf and Alex and Reese Wolf are preparing the componentry for the boat in Sydney. And, one of the very simple things that happens when you do something like drop a mast is a chance to re-engineer everything. So you start to look at how do we make this new mast lighter. And a byproduct of that is we've gone for a bit bigger tube section so we can have a thinner wall section in the mast. But the new mast won't fit in the boat as we sit. So we have to get our boat builders to Brisbane to recut the deck collar and reshape the deck collar, which is quite a big job. And right now they're locked out of Brisbane. So, we're not at panic stations yet. We've got 5 weeks before we need to get them there to hit our deadline. But say all that goes to plan, we'll do a fully crewed delivery to Brisbane, from Brisbane to Sydney, which will do our overnight training and watch training and all that sort of stuff. And then we'll be ready for the cabbage tree. We'll just talking about the cabbage tree. It's a new innovation for the club. We've got the Australian Maxi Championships for the CYC, which starts with the Cabbage Tree Island race on Friday, the 3rd of December. And then on Monday, the 6th, there's 1 or 2 coastal races, either up north to Pittwater, where we're just talking about, or down to Botany Bay Way.
one or two races, then the Solus Big Boat Challenge on Tuesday the 7th. So, 4 days of terrific racing for boats of 60 foot and above with an IRC handicap. So that's something really to look forward to, Mark. And, we should get some good traction there, I would think.
Yeah, so the concept there, and everyone on this call, as well as CYCA members, have been really behind this. Bradshaw, Kellett, Griffo, there's been a lot of people on board here, and we've worked really hard at this. The concept is sort of like a Maxi Worlds, because we can't travel with the boats, and so there'll be Maxi Division, which is the 100-footers, Scallywag, Oates, us, and Infotrack, and then the mini Maxis, of which I think most people would be surprised how many there are in Australia. I think there's about 12 really competitive boats. Whisper would lead that group, but also Sean Langman's boat. Grant Warrington has the old boat Jest. There's Alive, there's Wild Oats 10. There's plenty of these boats around. Goatsy owns 2 or 3 of them in that size bracket. So, that'll be the other part of the racing division. And then the group that we're really trying to attract and really target is the old IOR boats, the boats that are the cruising boats, the Rupert Henry's J boat, the old Margaret Rintoul, the Paddy Broughton's boat, these boats that have got some real history, that are big boats. There's about 15 of those in this country that are maxi boats in their own right, and they'll do their own division that won't race with the bowsprit boats, and hopefully it's an opportunity for them to win an Australian championship.
Yeah, that's terrific. And then we lead into our classic regatta the following weekend. So it's a real festival of sail. So I'll move away from that, and Flipper, I'll come to you quickly. Talk America's Cup. And I think, most of us who are watching tonight watched the America's Cup with great interest and saw those flying machines. Just talking about the mainsails on these, they were double skin mainsails on these America's Cup boats. Explain how that all works, please.
Yeah, shippers, yeah, exactly right. They're double skin mainsails. So simply, it's what we call a D-section mast. So it's not a traditional circular mast. It's a D-section. So imagine a curved front end and a square back with 2 luff grooves on the edge that are spaced about where you see my hands. It's about this far apart. So instead of 1 bolt rope going up the center of the mast, there are 2 bolt ropes going up on the back of the D-section mast. And then the battens, 2 independent mainsails, were fed up those 2 tracks. And then basically it was as simple as the battens coming together at the leach. And then as the main mast twists, the D-section twists, you rotate 1 batten further away and put 1 batten into compression. That gives the camber on the windward side of the sail and streamlines the leeward side of the sail. So that's how you get your depth. So simply a rotating mast section with 2 independent mainsails with the battens connected at the leach at the back end. And it was fantastic to see the technology that developed, because this was new for everybody. This engineering, the engineering challenges that came along to actually making it work were phenomenal to watch, to see, how far all the teams progressed, and huge amount of work on load studies and on the membrane and, the 3DI helix, the whole luff structure, the way we dealt with Cunningham loads. Hydraulic loads were unbelievable, to be able to basically load the membrane, to be able to make it as flat as a table when they were uprange. Everybody would have seen those fantastic helicopter shots of watching the boats foiling upwind. The mainsails were dead flat on the windward side, on the side that we're used to looking at, completely flat, 0% camber at times. But there was still some curvature at the leeward side. So just like looking at your aeroplane wing, when we're all flying, we look out at our 747 or our A380 airplane wing, we look at how flat they are. But then when they got caught in that light air and they had to maneuver and they had to go downwind, incredible how deep they could make the sails as well. So the secret was the ability to make a very, very flat section when they wanted to go fast, and a very, very deep section to get that power in the boat.
Fascinating, unbelievable. So Flipper, what's coming up for you once we get back racing? What's on your program?
Well, speaking of aeroplanes, I'm actually on one in a couple of weeks. I'm actually heading up to Europe because the second half of the European season begins with the Maxi Worlds. So we've got the Maxi Worlds that fascinated to see the new Scorpius, the Swan 125 that I'm sure a lot of watchers would have seen with the Fastnet race, an incredible piece of machinery. And then it's going to be racing against the likes of Rambler and Comanche. I'm actually racing in the Maxi 72 class, what's known as the Mini Maxi class. So 40 plus, I think the current entry list is 47 or 48 Maxis at the Maxi Worlds. And then the TP52 Super Series is on. So there's a lot going on.
Where's that being held, Flipper?
In Porto-Cervo, Sardinia.
Porto-Cervo, beautiful.
Yeah, so Rolex event. So it's going to be a big turnout. It'll be fun to watch. And then the Super Series, the TP52s, the RC44s, the Club Swans. There's a lot going on basically September, October and into November in the Northern Hemisphere.
And what about Hobart for you?
Hobart is with Wild Oats. We've got, the plan has been ever changing, the same as what Mark's been dealing with Blackjack. I'm quite involved with the Wild Oats program with the Oatley family and with Rico and Paul McGee. And every term we seem to have been knocked back, Hamilton Island being cancelled twice. But the plan is to get the big Silver Beast out, and be ready for, this Australian Maxi Championships and then run the program up from there.
Terrific. So Alby, what's your program? I suppose you're herding sheep, as you say. What's your term? You're herding all the sheep.
Herding cats.
Herding cats. That's right.
Herding the cats.
Yeah.
Oh, not really sure, Ship. It's all depends how it plays out. Yeah, we're meant to be up at Hamilton Island this week. I was meant to be up with Marcus Blackmore on the Ammonite, which unfortunately didn't happen. So hopefully we'll do a few races on her. And then, hopefully Hobart. Not sure what's happening, what boat I'll be on, but pretty keen to do it.
Right.
And then there's all the general stuff. Classic day on Wild Oats on Love and War, of course.
Absolutely.
The J70 stuff, lots of stuff going on.
Good. Well, Rob, to you finally. Fantastic to have you. I believe you're on Whisper for the Hobart and big boats and all that thing. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So we're, David's obviously campaigning the boat hard. Obviously bitterly disappointed not to be out there sailing now. So I think as soon as things open up, we'll be trying to get as much time on the water as we can. And, as everyone else, fingers crossed, we get to race the Hobart, or we'll certainly be racing somewhere over, November onwards or October onwards. And, so plenty of that, and then plenty of J70 sailing and moth sailing on the harbour.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, look, thanks, guys. Couple of things just got the results through. Here we go.
After that start, we should be good.
We were first. Love and War was second, and Crosshaven was third. There you go.
Awesome.
There you go. So well done, boys. So finally, look, thank you, Rob. To you, very happy birthday. I believe it's your birthday today.
It is. Thank you very much.
Have I got that right?
Yeah, you have 44 today.
Good on you. Good on you. Alby, thanks for putting this all together. It's terrific and wonderful to talk with you. Flipper, as always, great. Really good to hear from you again, and good luck overseas. It sounds a very exciting trip you've got. And as always, I know you'll go well and do well. And Rob, terrific to have you on board. And Mark, as the boss of North Sails, I think you should be pretty proud of your team. They're a terrific group, and it's been really insightful having you here. And hope we get Blackjack on the line and see you down here in December and go well. And I think for anyone viewing, if you want to get in touch with anything that we discussed today, there on the screen is the North Sail contact, alby.pratt@northsails.com, but I'm sure you can track them down. This will be replayed on the CYC website. So if you've missed anything or want to have another look at it or hear us all, you can do that. That'll be up in a few days. So look, again, thank you to all that one that tuned in and listened to us tonight. I hope you found it as insightful as I do. So to Mark and Rob Paul and Alby, thank you very much. And everyone stay safe in these strange times, and hopefully we'll see you at the club soon. So good night all, and stay well.